Broadcasting worldwide from the beautiful hill country in Texas, this is OneRadioNetwork.com. Well, a very pleasant good morning to you. This is Patrick Timpone, January 17, 2013. We're live every morning, 9 to 11 o'clock Central, worldwide, OneRadioNetwork.com. Good to have you here. Hope you had a pleasant night, slept well, got out and fed the chickens and poked the cows. And you didn't do that? Oh. Really? Next hour, we'll be going to Chile, speaking to a gentleman who had some very interesting experiences with electromagnetic fields. We've certainly talked about that subject before, but it's always good to do more, to dig in, see if we can better understand this phenomenon that probably started, 30 or so years ago, cell phones and stuff. And it's definitely an issue that it's good for us to learn more about so we can dodge the bullet, as they say. So that is next hour. Tomorrow, Open Phone Friday. If you have a question for Open Phones or a comment, you can email Patrick, that's me, Patrick at OneRadioNetwork.com, or emails during the show, same address. Or this morning and every morning live, Open Phones. And now, 800, make that 888-66. I've said that enough, for the last 5 years. You think I know. 888-663-6386. 888-663-6386. Just went brain dead for a moment. And first up this morning, I'm looking forward to this. This should be fun. This gentleman's been around the nutrition game for a long time. He is a PhD in nutrition and master's in psychology, so he can tell us how crazy we are. And he's written about 9 books, the 150 healthiest foods on earth, and the best foods, 100 healthiest foods for pregnancy, the most effective natural cures for pain, a lot of cool stuff. He's been on some big places over there in the networks and has written articles for the Daily Beast, Huffington Post. You've heard about all these, Wall Street Journal. And his name is Jonny Bowden, the rogue nutritionist. And he's co-authored a book with Dr. Stephen Sinatra, The Cholesterol Myth. Mr. Bowden, good morning.
Good morning, Patrick.
How are things in California?
Beautiful, thank you.
Yeah, man, nice to... Good. Thanks for getting up, I guess, at 7 o'clock there.
It is. No big deal. I'm usually on the tennis court by 8.
Really? What's Jonny Bowden going to have for breakfast? Being a nutritionist and all.
Probably a nice grass-fed buffalo burger.
Wow, yeah. Mm-hmm. Buffalo burger. We like those. You like those in the morning? Think it's good? Think it's a good idea to get good protein in the morning?
I think it's essential to get good protein in the morning at every meal.
Every meal. Some say that this breakfast thing, Jonny Bowden, and protein is really, really important. If you agree, can you tell us why?
I do agree, although there's been some buzz in the nutrition community in the last couple of years about something called intermittent fasting, which kind of sets all of our traditional advice on its ear. We've always been told to eat every few hours, or certainly to eat every, 3 meals a day at the very least, or 3 meals plus 2 snacks, and breakfast is the most important meal of the day. And there certainly is a lot of stuff to back that up. But there's also some very interesting emerging science about letting longer periods go between meals, that there may be some real benefits for that. They call it intermittent fasting. A day here, a day there, 10 hours here, maybe between 7 o'clock at night till noon the next day. Now, this isn't something that we recommend for everybody all the time, but it certainly does suggest that maybe there are more healthy ways to eat than just one template that fits everybody.
Sure. Well, is it that not, Jonny Bowden, where the word breakfast came from? Break fast?
Break fast, exactly.
Yeah. And I guess if you go back, if we were running around in the jungles, running from girls and chasing tigers, 10,000 years ago, I guess you wouldn't eat on schedule. You'd eat whenever.
Well, and that really is, I think, the crux of it, and that's the foundations of the whole Paleolithic movement, which I think makes tremendous sense. I mean, basically, our genes are adapted to a different kind of environment than the one we find ourselves in, and this is really at the crux of why we have an epidemic of obesity, diabetes, and heart disease. We're very well adapted to a environment in which there was famine and irregular feasts of food, and hunting and gathering, and this did not lead itself to easily scheduled meals, and our genes are very well adapted to that. They are not adapted to 24-hour supermarkets, and I think therein lies the problem. We have great genes. People say, I've got bad genes, that's why I'm fat. No, you've got great genes.
Your genes are looking good, yeah.
Those genes would keep you alive, in times of famine. They just were not meant for this 24-hour supermarket.
I know that you've written a whole book on living low carb, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and...
In fact, the new edition just came out. That's a brand new edition, and it's been around for about 7 years now, and this is its fourth edition, and it just came out with a revised edition.
What kind of things, Jonny Bowden, did you add to that new edition on low carbs?
Well, I wrote a chapter called "What About the China Study?" because somebody write to me and say the China study, that's the final proof that we're all meant to eat vegetarian diets, and the more protein you eat, the faster you die and the more cancer you get. And this book is something that many people have read and many people believe. So I devoted an entire chapter to kind of debunking the China study.
well, tell us a bit about that, because we've interviewed the fellow. I think he was 2 or 3 years ago.
Colin Campbell.
Yeah. What do you see in the China study that is flawed?
Oh, it's a 40-page chapter.
Yeah, just give us broad strokes. So, why is it in error, in your opinion?
Well, here's the thing, and it kind of leads us into the great cholesterol myth very well as well. Everybody who isn't in science professionally thinks science is done quite differently than it really is. When you gather data, you have massive amounts of correlations, massive amounts of data. In the case of the China project, I think they had 100,000 correlations were generated. They looked at every possible element in the diet, every amino acid, every vitamin, every mineral, every form of food, and then they looked at every possible disease state, and they looked at it in every country, by age, by race, by just about every variable you could imagine in this big mathematical stew, and it generated about 100,000 associations. Now, 92,000 of those were not statistically significant, meaning they were essentially made by chance, and the other 8,000 were perhaps significant. Now, of those 8,000, you have to go in there now and generate some sort of meaning. You've got 8 million things going on there. There's people who drive yellow cars have a greater tendency to watch television at 10 o'clock at night. That kind of thing. Well, is that a meaningful association? I don't know. What Colin Campbell went in and did is he picked out a bunch of associations that supported his preordained theory, which was that protein causes cancer. The more protein you eat, the sicker you get. He picked just the correlations that supported that. He left out dozens of correlations that refuted it. For example, there was a higher correlation with heart disease and wheat than there was with many of the other things that he wrote about, but he left that out because it didn't fit with his theory. He made some statements that are absolutely demonstrably false. The more cholesterol you eat, the sicker you get. The ideal amount of cholesterol in the diet is 0. This is demonstrably false. He made statements like the best source of folic acid is in vegetables. Demonstrably false. The highest source of folic acid is in chicken liver. So, basically what he was doing was arguing a vegan manifesto and picking the data that supported it. And that's what's wrong with the China study.
Thanks for that very concise answer.
And by the way, the man you interviewed, Colin Campbell, the man who wrote the book, The China Project, that's not the China Project. The actual China Project was an 875-page behemoth of a book. And it is essentially a chapter of introduction and then about 800 pages of these statistical associations. Colin Campbell's popular book is his opinion of what was found in the China study. It is not the actual China study. Now, he was one of the authors on the China study, but he wasn't the only one. There were two others, and as I said, it generated a massive amount of data, and then what Colin Campbell did is he put his vegan theory into a book, and he took the data from the study, from the real study, that supported that theory, and then he put it into a popular book, and now everybody thinks that's the research that shows we're all meant to be vegetarians, and it's just not true.
But can it not be argued on the other side of the coin, Jonny Bowden, that we've talked to the paleo people and the Western price people, and can it be argued that when they promote different studies and such, and they do their studies, they're going to put out, they're going to find studies.
They're going to support their theories.
Of course.
Certainly, it could be argued that about anything in science. It's absolutely true. The reason that it's a particular concern here is that there was so much data generated, and he was so selective at what he reported. Of course, we tend to spin the data, and one of the things we talk about in the Great Cholesterol book is the data has never been spun more effectively and more misleadingly than in the data on statin drugs and cholesterol, on lowering cholesterol and heart disease. That's a masterpiece of data spin, and I hope we'll get to talk about that.
Yeah, we are going to.
So yes, it's always true that there can be some spin. People put their products in the best possible light. When you go on a blind date, you don't start by telling them all the bad things in your family and about your crazy uncle. You put your best foot forward. You try to present yourself, your data, your products, your company in the strongest possible light. Everybody does that. It's somewhat dishonest, but not 100%. But in the case of the, sometimes it just goes over the top, and we call it cherry picking the evidence. And that's precisely what he did. And because that book has had so much influence, it's really necessary to take it apart and say, look, guys, this is not the whole story by any means.
I'm curious, when you look back, Jonny Bowden, on your basic education, where you had a PhD in nutrition, I'm wondering, are not most universities tied in big time with the AMA and the pharmaceutical? I think that can be argued pretty easily without being overcritical, right?
Yeah.
So how? What did you take out of that PhD? Did you learn a lot there? I mean, did you learn about cholesterol as you believe it to be now?
First of all, I went to a pretty unconventional school, so we were not tied to the pharmaceutical industry. But the point you make is a very good one. Doctors' medical education, ever since the early 1920s or so, a little bit before, and it's a very interesting story how it happened, has been supported by the pharmaceutical industries. In the very, very beginning of the century, the Rockefellers and the Astors, they had these foundations, and they'd give massive amounts of money to medical schools. But and it seemed, wow, that's very altruistic. How wonderful, the Rockefellers, and they're supporting these medical schools. Well, here's the thing: they were no dummies. They had in their portfolio tremendous amounts of drug companies and pharmaceutical stocks. And it was their very well thought out plan to support schools that were going to turn out doctors who wanted to use pharmaceuticals. So the medical education, and then after a while, when these medical universities began to be very dependent upon these grants, and these grants became very selective. It's like, you have to remember, we didn't always, doctoring wasn't always equated with pharmaceuticals. There was homeopathy. There was the naturopath tradition. There were lots of different ways of practicing medicine, and at one point even homeopathy, which I'm no great fan of, but was really about half of the medical education in the country was in the homeopathic tradition. So here come the Rockefellers and people like that with these huge grants for medical schools, and they basically say, we want to give grants to schools who are going to be kind of on board with us, that the wave of the future is giving these drugs to solve these problems. And if schools were not leaning, you see, right now it's hard for people to even imagine a medical school that didn't take that philosophic position. But at one time they didn't all take that philosophic position. And the Rockefellers and those were very, very careful to just give grants to schools that really promoted pharmaceutical interventions, which worked very well for them because they owned the pharmaceutical companies in their portfolios. So after a while, medical education, and we have a group now called No Free Lunches. This is even a pushback on this. The pharmaceutical industries have literally infiltrated medical education in this country. From the time that they're medical students, the pharmaceutical companies are giving them samples, they're buying them lunch, they're giving them little prescription pads with the name of their products on it. Now most doctors get their information about drugs from perky little pharmaceutical representatives. If you live near an office building, you can see them every single day with their little suitcases, very good looking. They come with lunch, they come with samples, and basically this is how doctors get their information about drugs. And the interesting thing is, every single study that asks doctors, are you influenced by this sort of thing? Are you influenced by the dinners and the honorariums and the perky little pharmaceutical reps and the promotional literature? Does that make a difference in your prescription, in your prescribing? And every single survey shows that doctors believe it makes no difference. They believe they're not influenced, and those same studies show that they are.
What you just said about the genesis of the allopathic paradigm is very fascinating. I first learned about that with by book Eustace Mullins, Murder by Injection.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and he talked about that, and I guess it was, what was it, Jonny Bowden, in the early 1900s, and this whole paradigm was set up, Mullins argued, was three things, was pharmaceutical medicines, surgery, and long hospital stays.
Well, there you have it.
That was their, and I forget which big foundations they worked with, but there are some that we know, but the name is escaping me at the moment. But fascinating stuff, isn't it? It's only 100 years old, really.
Yep, that's right.
It's not working too well, is it?
Well, the cholesterol establishment certainly is working very well for the drug companies, but it's not working very well for us because cholesterol is not the cause of heart disease. It never has been. It never will be. As
somebody said on the show several times, just because cholesterol is found at the scene of the crime doesn't mean it's the perpetrator.
That's precisely.
Isn't that interesting? So we're gonna do that and dig into the book that this gentleman, who pretty passionate about this stuff, love all the information, Jonny Bowden. Whether or not he's completely accurate with what he's saying, that's up to you. That's the deal. He's a PhD in nutrition, and he has co-authored The Great Cholesterol Myth with Dr. Sinatra, who we're going to get on as well if he'll come on the show. And we've had other people over the years talk about this cholesterol thing, but we're going to get some more and different insights into it with Jonny Bowden right after a couple messages here. Daniel Vitalis, what is the vision of your company, Surthrival?
To answer the question, let's give a little background. Of course, I have a company called Surthrival, and what Surthrival is about, the mission of that company is to find the most regenerative products that come out of nature, in other words, that are foods, and bring those to people, because I see a lot of people now going to things like bioidentical hormone replacement. I see a lot of people going to things like HGH injections, human growth hormone injections. And they're looking for things that will regenerate them, things that will keep them youthful, but they're finding them, essentially, if you really look at it, they're getting them from the pharmaceutical companies. Since the pharmaceutical companies derive most of what they use from nature and then synthesize or change it, I'm looking to bring products to people that are actually from nature, that are whole food-based products that will work, that will do the same thing, that might even work better, and that have no side effects.
Thank you, Daniel. Look for Surthrival Elk Velvet Antler, Pine Pollen, Colostrum, and more of Surthrival's products on OneRadioNetwork.com. Previously with Stephen Huer on One World Way and why vegetarians and vegans should try this raw, grass-fed whey protein.
This is what gets down to amino acid science. People don't realize this, and this is why the vegans are typically failing to thrive, is because even though they're getting the essential amino acids in their diets from their grain and legume and whatever sources they're trying to rely upon, spirulina, whatever, they're not getting a rich enough array and a large enough quantity, and frequently these amino acids are bound to cellulose, and the human digestive tract has no cellulase, the enzyme needed to digest cellulose, so the rate at which you can get access to the amino acids from a vegetarian pea protein or rice protein is so slow that you never attain what's called a positive nitrogen balance. You never attain enough amino acids in your bloodstream to cause your body to go, oh, I'm going to go gangbusters on creating new muscle, new organ, new brain tissue, whatever tissue it wants to. Instead, it's just a slow leak into the bloodstream so that people are making mostly glucose out of their amino acids as opposed to new protein structures. And that's the problem with vegetarian protein powders like hemp and all that, is they do not provide you the enough to get into a positive nitrogen balance.
Well, we'll see. The proof's always in the pudding. Sounds like a compelling argument for vegans and vegetarians to try One World Way. Click and order right on the front page of OneRadioNetwork.com. And they come. He's got 3 flavors: vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. I suggest getting a small can, maybe of each, or pick out 1 or 2 of your faves, or just one, and then find the one that suits you the best as far as flavor. And then you get the big, super 5-pound can that's big as a trash can. It's huge. When I got that, I couldn't believe it, how big it is. We like this product, and we mix it with Daniel Vitalis's colostrum. It's the same thing. A colostrum, and it's really good. Yeah.
We hope you're enjoying the program on One Radio Network, sponsored by usgoldcoins.com. At usgoldcoins.com, we provide the best in gold and silver coins, and we've been doing so for over 30 years. Perhaps you're a first-time investor to gold and silver. Perhaps you've been considering adding physical wealth to your portfolio. If you've had any hesitancies at all about looking into this market, now would be a great time to give us a call. 1-800-878-2646 or log on at usgoldcoins.com. We'd be happy to help educate you and provide you with the best in gold and silver coins. Call us today at 1-800-878-2646. Whether you're a seasoned investor or a first-time person to the entire market of gold and silver, we want to be your resource. And you can reach us toll-free, 1-800-878-2646.
All right, gold is up about $6 today to $16.86. Silver is up 15 cents, 31.74. All you silver bugs just fell off your chair, not 71, 31.74, excuse me. And the dollar is down a bit, and oil is up about $1 or so because of that stuff going on with the hostage thing. That's from usgoldcoins.com, the gold and silver prices.
We are listener supported. One Radio Network. Talk to Patrick now. 888-663-6386. Or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
We indeed are listener supported, and we surely appreciate your support by maybe considering our products that we promote, and we're very selective about those. And then also, we do take donations ongoing through PayPal, $5, $10, $15, $20. Some people send us $10 a month or whatever. Sharon and I appreciate it very, very much. With Jonny Bowden, co-author of a new book called The Great Cholesterol Myth. Jonny Bowden, did this whole cholesterol thing, if I remember, did it start with that Framingham study in 1948? Is that when this started?
No. Well, that was certainly one of the keystone studies. And as you correctly point out, the Framingham study, Framingham, Massachusetts, they began in 1948, still ongoing, and it's a long-running study of the people in this town in Massachusetts, what they eat and how they die, and kind of trying to connect the dots. Mm-hmm. And very interestingly about that, we'll come back to that in a moment, because I'm so glad you brought up the Framingham study. But let me tell you what was going on at the same time.
Okay.
Basically, we didn't really have a lot of heart disease in this country. in the early part of the 20th century. In the olden days, when you had an actual operation on heart disease, physicians would come over on like the Queen Mary to watch it because it was so, from Europe, because it was such a rare thing. It really, heart disease wasn't identified as a major killer or as a major disease. It wasn't really until after World War II when young men started coming back here and dying, and we started seeing atherosclerosis as what appeared to be an epidemic. And there was a tremendous, it was kind of, if you can think of it in modern times, you see this horrible tragedy that we just saw at Sandy Hook, and there is this huge outcry, right? We need to do something. I think everybody, no matter where you are on the political side of the spectrum, will agree that there has been some kind of an outcry saying, do something, do something. Well, that's what was happening back then with heart disease. It's like our young men are dying, and these doctors are finding these sclerotic plaques in their arteries. We've got to do something. Okay, so here's what happened. Nixon was president, and there was a committee led by Senator McGovern, George McGovern, who later ran for president. It was called the McGovern Select Committee on Nutrition. It ran from 1968 to 77.
I remember, yeah.
And what the mandate of this committee was to wipe out malnutrition in America. And Nixon was well motivated with that. I mean, he made it turned out to have some bad collateral damage with the Farm Bill and stuff like that, but he was well motivated by that, and the committee was certainly well motivated, and they wanted to wipe out malnutrition and food insecurity. Now, they disbanded around 1977. But around that time, before they disbanded, they were all very idealistic and young lawyers and researchers from Harvard, and they wanted to do something really good for the country. And they said, before we disband, we kind of got the malnutrition thing down, but let's make some recommendations. We've got these people dying. We have what appears to be an epidemic of heart disease. We're not quite sure why. For God's sake, let's tell people what we have found, what the experts think about what is causing this epidemic of heart disease. Let's give them some guidelines about how to eat. Seems like a reasonable thing to do, right? And there was this outcry, like, tell us what's going on with this heart disease thing. Please give us some recommendations. So they look around at the science. Now, there are two competing theories about what's going on here. One of them is promoted by an American physiologist named Ansel Keys, and he is absolutely positive that the cause of heart disease is fat and cholesterol. And he published a study called the 7-Country Study, which would not have been able to be published today. It is so flawed. It has been so taken apart and shown to be completely cherry-picked evidence. It just would not stand up today. We didn't even have, computers to do statistical analysis then, but he got this study published, the 7-Country Study. He was a very prominent physiologist. He had been involved in starvation experiments, in the development of the K rations, for war, and he was able to push this theory through. And there was a competing theory, and it was by John Yudkin, a very distinguished MD in England. And he said, Ansel, you got the wrong element here. It's sugar that tracks better with heart disease than fat. And I have the data to prove it. And these two guys battled it out. They were like the NRA and the anti-gun people. I'm telling you, it was a vicious battle, but it was fought behind the scenes.
And what year was this, Jonny Bowden?
Ansel Keys began doing his work around the same time as the Framingham study.
Okay.
This was in the air. He was doing his work in the 50s and the 60s, and then this all came to a head with these competing theories about what should we tell the country. And what they finally did was they had a committee, and they called it this consensus committee. And they said, we're going to get these scientists together. We're going to figure this out once and for all. I said, that is it. Sugar, what the heck is it? And then we're going to tell the American people what to eat. So they had the consensus committee of 1984, and they came out and they made a statement, and they said, fat and cholesterol, very bad. You should limit your fat to 30% of calories, saturated fat to no more than 10. Everything that you've heard for the last 30 years came out of the consensus committee. Here's the problem. That consensus committee looked like the U.S. Congress today. That was about as much consensus as you're seeing right now in the Congress and that you've seen in the last 2 years. Now let's go back to the Framingham study. The associate director of the Framingham study, which is supposedly put this whole cholesterol thing on the map, George Mann, went on record as saying that the cholesterol and fat hypothesis was the biggest scam ever perpetrated on the American public.
He said that publicly. That's what I heard. I've never seen it.
When we put that in the book, now that has been long quoted for 20, 30, 40 years. Man is still alive. He has never repudiated that quote. But when I put that quote in the book, my editors, much like you, said, this is a controversial book. You better back every statement. We found the quote. So yes, the quote exists. The reference is in my book. He did say the greatest scam ever perpetrated on the American. He said it in many, many different forms, that same statement. So you had this consensus committee that kind of beat out this statement that, fat and cholesterol were at the heart of the problem. But as I've said many times before, what happened here is the wrong theory won. Yudkin and his sugar theory were right all along.
How do you know? Why do you believe that?
Because the data does not support cholesterol as being a promoter of heart disease. Look, Patrick, 50% of people who are admitted to U.S. hospitals with cardiovascular disease have normal cholesterol. 50% of people with elevated cholesterol have normal hearts. Tell me how that helps predict cholesterol. In the Leon Heart study, they had two groups of people who were walking dead. They had every risk factor you can imagine. High cholesterol, they smoked, they didn't exercise, they had heart attacks. They put one group on a Mediterranean diet. They put the other group on the prudent diet of low cholesterol, low fat. The Mediterranean diet people died at a double-digit rate less than the people on the other diet, so they stopped the study and put everyone on the Mediterranean diet. What do you think happened to the cholesterol of the people who were no longer dying?
I have no idea.
It didn't budge. They just stopped dying. Cholesterol had nothing to do with it. So the point is, you've got this molecule, which is of absolute essence for human life. It's needed for memory. It's needed for thinking. It's needed for fighting infections. You make bile acids out of it. You make vitamin D out of it. You make your sex hormones from cholesterol. Estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone come from cholesterol. You've got this blood marker of this molecule that we need desperately. And we have focused so obsessively on lowering cholesterol that we've taken our eyes off the real causes of heart disease. And now you have an industry that literally brings in over $30 billion a year for its makers. Do you think that's going to turn around anytime soon?
Yeah.
Of course they want us to continue to believe that cholesterol is at the heart of the problem. Cholesterol is found at the scene of the crime, but it is not the perpetrator. Blaming cholesterol for heart disease is like blaming the fireman for the fire or the umbrella for the rain.
So statins, is that number accurate? I didn't realize it was that high.
It's higher.
30
it's higher,
billion?
and here's why.
30 billion worldwide?
31 billion, and that's only for the top two drugs, Zocor and Lipitor. I haven't included the budget of the National Cholesterol Education Program or any of the low-fat, low-cholesterol food products. That's just Lipitor and Zocor, 31 billion. It may go down a little bit now because Lipitor is coming off patent, but Lipitor is the best-selling drug of all time.
Why are you so convinced that fats, saturated fats, whether it be in grass-fed meat, like you're having a buffalo burger, or eggs, or cream, or butter, good fat, avocados, why are you convinced that we need these foods?
Why am I convinced that we need which foods?
The good fats that I just mentioned, the grass-fed meats, the butter, cream, avocados, nuts.
Fat serves so many purposes in our body. It cushions our organs. It serves as the best source of energy for our bodies. We can store approximately 1,800 calories of glucose or glycogen, carbohydrates. We can store about 70 gazillion calories of fat. So fat always has been the best fuel source for the body. The body makes fat. The very first fat that the body makes, the liver makes, is a saturated fat, palmitic acid. So we need these fats. Omega-3s get into the cell membranes, and they make communication between the cells go easier. So you can get serotonin in and out of the cell better with omega-3s in the membrane. The monounsaturated fats deliver polyphenols from the olives, and they calm inflammation. I mean, these fats have tremendous uses. in the human body, and they're just needed for it. If you went on a totally fat-free diet, you would die. You need protein, you need fat. The only macronutrient for which there is no absolute daily dietary requirement is carbohydrate.
Huh. So how do we explain, or you explain, you don't have to, because if you don't, how many vegans and vegetarians, they do okay. They do fine.
I can explain it very well. And it's something that I came to rather recently, because I was very partisan on the side of higher fat, higher protein diets for lowering cholesterol, for lowering heart disease and for lowering obesity and diabetes. I believe that is the intervention that works, and I was very partisan about that. I have subsequently come to alter that position just slightly, and I now know why we occasionally see a vegan or a vegetarian diet working successfully. And the reason is, if you look at the Atkins diet, the most extreme version of carbohydrate restriction, all the fat you want, all the protein you want, but only 20 grams of carbohydrate a day, all coming from vegetables. That's one extreme, right? You look at another extreme, the Asian diet, lots of white rice and some fish and some vegetables, and almost no fat and almost very moderate amount of protein. Or you look at another diet that's maybe raw foods.
Yeah.
What do they all have in common?
What do they all have in common? Vegetables?
No, two extreme diets like that, a high-fat, high-protein diet and a vegan or vegetarian diet, if it's done properly.
Oh, no carbs?
No sugar.
Oh, no, well, carbs are sugar, essentially. Right?
No sugar.
Yeah.
So even the people eating the white rice, and even the people eating, the raw foods, and even the people eating a vegan diet, which I think has a lot of problems, but I'll give you that it works for some people.
Yeah.
They are not eating fructose. There's not a diet on the planet in any indigenous people ever studied, any hunter-gatherer study, and there are dozens of these studies, and they show very varied diets. Some are high fat, some are high carb. None of them are high sugar. And that is at the key. That's why sometimes those other diets work, why our diet, a more Paleolithic diet works. It's all because it doesn't have the sugar. Ansel Keys was wrong. Yudkin was right. Sugar is inflammatory. Sugar is at the heart of one of the major causes of heart disease. It has never been fat. Fat has been exonerated in the latest studies. It's always been sugar. We just haven't recognized it.
But if we go out and have a McDonald's and have the bun, that is detrimental sugar, correct?
Correct.
Because of the bun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
it's not just sugar. It's not just sugar from the table, from the sugar bowl that you put into your coffee.
Right.
Foods that convert to sugar in the body in a heartbeat. That includes breads, pastas, rice, cakes, Twinkies, cereals. My God, breakfast cereals are pure sugar. So these foods don't have to actually look like the stuff you put into your coffee, but the body sees by the time it gets through the esophagus and turns into a bolus of food and hits the stomach is saying, whoops, guy ate a ding-dong, and it doesn't matter whether it's chocolate Cheerios or whether it's pure Domino sugar. That's how the stomach treats it, a bolus of sugar, and it processes it the same way.
And sugar from an apple and from a waffle, the difference?
Very big difference. Fructose in its natural setting. I always liken it. I don't know how many animal people there are in the audience, but here's how I liken it. I love fur. I love it. Wolf fur and fox fur. I love it on its rightful owner. Put that same fur on the back of a lady at the opera, I think it's disgusting. So there's fur on its natural owner, and there's fur on the back of the lady at the opera. Two different things. There's fructose in an apple, which is a very small portion of the apple. It's not that much fructose, but there's a little in there. It's surrounded with fiber, which is one of the most heart-healthy nutrients in the world. It's surrounded with vitamins and minerals and antioxidants and phytochemicals, all in that apple, together as a food, with a little bit of fructose. Not very damaging. Now, you take that fructose out of its original owner, you concentrate it into a syrup, and you add it to every food in America, you are talking about a very, very different metabolic issue. You are now talking about taking something which in its natural setting is perfectly benign and turning it into a concentrated metabolic poison. That's the difference.
I want to go back just a second. When you said in the early 1900s, before World War 2, there was just not a lot of heart disease. And I'm thinking, I would suspect that people between 1900 and 1950 were eating their share of, I'm just theorizing, I can't prove it, but bacon and eggs.
But you actually can prove it.
And chicken and meat, right? Were they not? Were they not?
They absolutely were. I mean, the whole premise of the Weston Price organization is that when we ate our natural traditional foods, not these ridiculous low-fat bastardizations of real food, but we ate food with the fat it came with from grass-fed animals, not factory-farmed feedlot animals, which are poison.
Yeah.
But when we ate our natural diet, we fried in lard, not Crisco, but lard, real animal product lard, and we ate, all of these foods. We had vanishingly low levels of heart disease. There's a lot of studies like this. The Puka Puka tribes in the Trobriand Islanders, this is an early study in the 70s, 80% of their calories come from coconut and saturated fat in coconut. Guess what? They couldn't measure heart disease in those two countries. Couldn't measure it. It was so low. It was beneath the statistical, able to even detect like 1% of it.
I can remember that my first year of college was 1964, and I worked for McDonald's part-time, Jonny Bowden, in 64, and they fried the French fries in beef tallow. Beef tallow.
Yeah, well, it is remarkable how you get looked at as if you are hearing voices through the fillings in your teeth when you say things like this. But the truth is, lard, old-fashioned real lard, is hell of a lot healthier. If you're going to fry food, it's a hell of a lot healthier to fry it in lard than it is to fry it in vegetable oil. The swap out of vegetable oil for lard in the wake of this huge cholesterol phobia thing, it was actually a terrible idea. Vegetable fat, especially when it's reused in restaurants the way it is for an average of a week, they heat it, cool it, heat it, cool it. It mutates. It turns into carcinogenic nightmare. It creates, all kinds of things, heterocyclic amines, all kinds of carcinogens, and trans fats are created by that. Saturated fat, beef tallow, real lard, actually stands up to heat very well. It doesn't mutate, and it doesn't turn into carcinogens. So actually, when we got into this crazy, let's avoid the fat, let's avoid the saturated fat and cholesterol, we actually made some terrible, stupid mistakes, like the margarine swap out, for God's sake. That was far worse than anything it was supposed to substitute for.
Well, do you recall the whole coconut oil, palm oil thing, and then they brought in. I know, we know that now. But back in when was it? The early 90s.
Yeah.
And then they sold us on canola oil. That story's really interesting.
Well, that's a whole other story.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
What I really want to get across, though, is how important this whole cholesterol thing is, because I started life in fitness as a weight loss coach. I started in 1990 as a personal trainer. I didn't have a degree in nutrition. I had only learned the nutrition that we learned as personal trainers, which was the same old crap trap we get from the American Dietetic Association, aerobic exercise, high-carb diets, keep the fat low. And it just was, that's what I learned, and that's what I grew up on as a trainer. And the reason I came to this subject is that my clients who were not losing weight on the low-fat diet with aerobics, and they were doing everything right, would sometimes go on a diet like the Atkins diet against my recommendations. And I, like everybody else at the time, believed these people would just die of a heart attack. Yeah, they might lose a few pounds, but my God, all that saturated fat and bacon, what's going to happen to them? And I believed that the same way they did. But what happened is they would defy me, and they'd go on these diets, they'd come back not only losing weight, but with improved blood lipids. And they weren't dying, and their cholesterol wasn't going nuts, and they were having really good results. And this did not fit for me with what I had been taught. So I began looking at this a little more closely and realized that there has been a vocal minority in this field for 20 years. Scholars, research people, MDs, PhDs, health professionals of all stripes across the world who have for many years questioned the efficacy and the accuracy of these studies on cholesterol and saturated fat. And they've said, the emperor's got no clothes on. And when I realized that I was hardly alone in questioning this is when I went back to school for nutrition, this is when I got my degree, and this is when I began practicing, began speaking about the cholesterol myth, because I arrived at my skepticism about cholesterol through the process of trying to help people lose weight, and realizing that the diets that they were eating, which were all based on cholesterol phobia, were actually making them fat and unhealthy.
Yeah. Well, after this short break, I want to talk about your understanding of how excess carbs, sugar, clog up the arteries. But here, this quick little email, Kate in Lexington, the first person I ever heard about being on cholesterol, I guess meds, is my uncle, who has been cholesterol-lowering medications for 20 years, following a low-fat diet all this time, recently underwent quadruple bypass. I agree with Dr. Bowden. So let's do this quick break, and then we're going to talk about this whole sugar paradigm, how this works. Stay right there.
Sure.
Previously with Daniel Vitalis, and why our elk velvet is special.
All of our elk, and we don't work with deer anymore, we work with elk, which is a subtype of deer, but is a much larger, more powerful animal. We work with elk from the western United States exclusively. Because we work with animal products, it's a little bit delicate. We want to work with the most humane products that we can. And what's really interesting about this, Patrick, and this was really hard for me to believe at first, but this is actually how this works, is that particularly it's one farmer who goes up to the elk when they're in velvet and actually clips the antlers off in the field, clip the antler without needing a tourniquet, without needing an anesthetic, while the animals are just simply in the field eating. And they're so comfortable with the farmer that they allow that. It's really amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah, it's actually really amazing. And it took me a little while to really even believe that could be done.
Yes, amazing indeed. Elk Velvet Antler and other Surthrival products on OneRadioNetwork.com. I went to see my friend Dr. Nunley yesterday, and we mostly talked about chickens. His wife is doing chickens, Rebecca, and he's just a fascinating fellow. I don't know if you've heard this story, but my dentist in Marble Falls, Dr. Nunley, dentist for many years before he really got sick. I mean, really sick, literally in a wheelchair many years ago. And he was just a traditional dentist, put in mercury fillings and such. And he found his way to Dr. Huggins, Hal Huggins, who, by the way, has written a whole book on cholesterol and saying the best number for cholesterol, according to his research, is 225. 225. I'll mention that to Jonny Bowden. Oh, he can hear right now. 225, Dr. Huggins says, is the best number. Now, he claims that he has 300,000 data points where he does blood tests with the work of Melvin Page to back up that number. But anyway, Dr. Nunley really got out of his problems by sweating and high doses vitamin C, detoxing from all the mercury. And today you can't believe the way he looks. He's a triathlete, and he was literally in a wheelchair at one point simply from mercury poisoning. And these saunas, far infrared saunas, what he used along with vitamin C to get out the stuff. And this is a little thing he said about saunas.
Some people become more ill when they're detoxed quickly via IV, when we're using chemical chelators. Because if you shake too much of the heavy metal loose and you don't grab it all up, then you are becoming retoxified. I like slow and gentle when it comes to detox. That's why one of the reasons why I'm in such favor of using an infrared sauna. We
promote this portable one that for a few years that we love. It's really cool, and it's under $1,000. That's why it's really cool, and it works, and you will sweat like there's no tomorrow, and you can move it from room to room. These special far infrared lights are down at the bottom, and we've checked it. It is very low EMF. No machines of any kind are completely free of electromagnetic fields, that we're going to be talking about in about 15 minutes. But we have 3 different meters, and we've done the research. The only thing we get is a dose of magnetic radiation between the floor up to the bottom of the chair, so it's not on the genitals, which is good. But also, this is lower than the magnetic radiation on my meter I get in driving around in my Prius. So magnetic radiation from motors is everywhere. Other than that, there's no RFs or there's no electrical fields in these saunas. Tax title license with the promo code OneRadio is $935. Click an order on the front page of One Radio Network. It goes through PayPal, very secure, but you do not have to be a PayPal member. Just click the little link that says not a PayPal member. Use any credit debit card. You'll have it in about 3 days via FedEx Ground. Portable, very well built, and a 1-year warranty on the mechanics of it. It is a beautiful thing. You will sweat a lot. And that is the Relax Far Infrared Sauna.
Nothing is more expensive than bad information. Know the source. OneRadioNetwork.com. Talk to Patrick now. 888-663-6386. Or email patrick@oneradionetwork.com.
So you go to the movies and you get popcorn. They say, would you like butter on it? You say, is that real butter? And they look at you like, what? What happened to remember the days we had coconut oil being used for a butter, Johnny? Our popping popcorn in real butter. I remember those days.
Sure.
I remember. Okay. We got a few minutes left here. So what is your understanding of why carbohydrates that turn to sugar or high fructose corn syrup or sugar causes the arteries to clog up? Let's keep it simple.
Well, you see, actually, the whole notion of the arteries clogging up is not exactly accurate.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it actually happens underneath in the artery wall, not in the artery. People have this picture of like fat getting stuck to the arteries and then just sort of forming this. What actually happens is it kind of happens, if you can think of a blister, it kind of happens under the skin, under the lining of the artery. But what happens with sugar is, as we explain in the book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, the real instigator of heart disease is inflammation. So you've got this artery wall, and there are little cuts in it, like a paper cut, and it can happen from anything. It can happen from the remnant of the metabolic products of trans fats. It can happen from things in the bloodstream. It can happen from high blood pressure, like, just constant pounding again. But you get these little cracks in the endothelial wall, these little injuries, and then different compounds come to patch it up. And one of them is oxidized LDL cholesterol, sure, but there are plenty of others as well. And they sort of patch this up under the skin of the lining of the artery, if you will, under the endothelial wall. And the more inflammation there is there, and the more oxidative damage, more free radicals attack the substance, and then that creates more inflammation, and then more inflammatory cytokines go to the area. And without that inflammation, there is no heart disease. So cholesterol, sure, there's a particular type of cholesterol. It's a damaged LDL-B particle, and it's not all of LDL. We talk about in the book, while we're even the way we measure cholesterol now is completely out of date. We're still using LDL and HDL when it's a really much more advanced way of measuring it now. But this particular type does get caught there. But again, it's there trying to patch up the injury. It's the injuries, the inflammatory injuries that we need to be addressing, and we can do that with an anti-inflammatory diet, a diet high in antioxidants, so the LDL cholesterol doesn't get damaged in the first place. And sugar contributes to this in a couple of different ways. Number one, when you have protein, a protein is like a tadpole. It's very slippery. When you have proteins in the blood, they can get in and out of anything, and that's the way they were designed. You've got thin little capillaries. You need those little proteins to get out, you'll be able to swim through them. When you have too much sugar in the system, too many carbohydrates that convert to sugar quickly, you've got a lot of sugar floating around the bloodstream. It starts to glom onto those protein molecules. It starts to make them sticky. So now you have what's called glycolated proteins. They're sticky. They're like putting cotton candy in a gas tank or putting sugar on a tadpole. They become sticky, and they become harder to get in and out of little areas. That's why diabetics have so much problems with their big toes, their eyes, and their kidneys, because these glycolated proteins, these sugar-coated proteins, become too sticky to get through the little capillaries in the kidneys, the eyes, and the big toe. So what happens to diabetics? They go blind, they have their big toe amputated, and they go on dialysis. So the sugar gloms up the works in this way. Now, when you have these glycolated proteins, they tend to attract one another, and they form complexes called called AGES, AGES, which is a perfect acronym because they age the body. And they are called advanced glycolylated end products. It's kind of like losers attract losers in high school. Well, these nasty little cotton candy coated proteins attract each other and they form these little clumps. They get caught in the artery wall, in the endothelium, and they cause even more oxidative damage and more inflammation. So sugar is inflammatory by itself. They've done studies. There's a wonderful study. I call it the cornflake study. We talk about it in the book, in which they fed people a breakfast of either water or fiber or cornflakes. And then they did a measurement on the brachial artery, a measurement that's used to test, blockage or thickening. And after the cornflakes breakfast, everybody scored higher on that measure of cardiovascular insufficiency, that measure of thickening and inflammation. So sugar is inflammatory for a number of different reasons, and it's not only found at the scene of the crime, it is clearly way more of a promoter of heart disease than fat ever was.
So but then I guess, Jonny Bowden, that bacterial or viral infection can also cause, if the immune system is compromised, can also cause this inflammation in the arteries?
Absolutely. Yeah. Medicines that we take, toxins that we breathe, is crap that's in the water. A diet high in pesticides and fungicides and all the other chemicals that we ingest on a daily basis. Any of these can cause an irritation. Just think of it as an irritation in the artery walls. And once you have that little irritation, a scab forms over, just like it does on your finger if you have a little bit of a cut. And that scab forming over, yes, there's a little bit of LDL oxidized cholesterol in that scab, but that didn't cause the scab. The injury caused the scab. Yeah. That's just the body's way of trying to heal it over.
Yeah,
so if we went to the source of the injury, the source of the inflammation, we'd actually be doing something for ourselves rather than chasing this molecule, chasing the firemen to protect fires.
Yeah, good visual. But just take the argument on the other side. People may be thinking, so let's say someone is not very healthy, they do not detoxify, they're getting inflammation in their body, they're on medication. Could it be an argument for I know you're not going to like this, but could it be an argument for a low cholesterol diet because you're going to have less of the stuff in there that maybe will go to try to fix the problem? Am I
you have that's a reasonable argument on the surface of it.
Yeah.
Two things I would say about that.
Okay.
Number one, even Ansel Keys, the father of the whole hypothesis, knew that dietary cholesterol had almost nothing to do with it.
Oh, that's right. The argument,
makes almost no difference to the cholesterol in your blood. That's the first problem with it. The second issue about, wouldn't it make sense, since some of this cholesterol gets caught in the patchwork in these injuries, the lower the cholesterol, well, sure, then we'll have less to patch it up with. But here's the problem. That's like saying, I live in California, we have wildfires out here all the time. You always read about it, right? In the Topanga Canyon, just, a big wildfire with all the dead trees and all the, if there's any kind of drought. You could say, well, one way we could prevent that is let's just level the forest. Let's just get all the trees out. Then they won't be able to catch fire. Well, that's true, but there's huge ecological ramifications of that. There's huge aesthetic ramifications of that. Wouldn't it be better to water the trees so that they won't, rather than to just get rid of them? Because getting rid of cholesterol, sure, then you won't have anything to patch up the injuries. You'll have to use other things to patch up the injuries with. And that would be one way to prevent the patching up that turns into plaque. But wouldn't it be better to just prevent the injury in the first place? Because getting rid of cholesterol is like getting rid of all the trees. Yeah, you won't have any fires, but you also won't have a beautiful forest, will you?
So are you saying then, Jonny Bowden, that even if one was consuming a low amount of cholesterol, and let's see, where am I going with this? I guess the body's always going to patch this little guy up because the liver makes cholesterol.
The liver makes 80%
right?
of the cholesterol in your body.
So when you eat a lot of eggs or meat, it doesn't really raise your cholesterol number, but that doesn't matter anyway. But it does it, even if it doesn't matter, does it raise?
It raises it in 1% of the population who has a condition called familial hypercholesterolemia. It's a genetic disposition to not be able to process and make cholesterol in a normal way. Yes, in that tiny population, the amount that you eat does make a difference. But for 99% of the rest of the world, it does not.
We could do a whole show on statins. You mentioned it's about $30 billion industry. But just give us your short
My short form.
No, your short form idea of why it could possibly be dangerous to take a statin to get your cholesterol down to 120 where the docs want it to be.
Well, first of all, there are a lot of problems with low cholesterol. It is linked to increased deaths from other things other than heart disease, like, for example, accidents and suicides. And the reason for that, we think, is because cholesterol is so involved in the brain. And when you lower it that much artificially, you're actually looking for trouble on another front. So that's number one. But the problem with statins is that they're overprescribed. They're prescribed to populations in whom they have no effect, like women, and in well, I shouldn't say no effect, but they've never been shown to save a single woman's life ever in any study. And if your doctor says they have, please ask them to show you the study because they don't exist. Number two, they've never been tested in children, and you now have this huge marketing campaign on the part of the pharmaceutical industries to convince parents that they should get their kids early and prevent heart disease and get them on statin drugs. Well, that's an extra 11 million customers for them. Of course, the stockholders will be very happy with that. The problem is your child's brain is not finished growing till he's 25, and cholesterol is needed in the brain for thinking and memory and sex drive. Do you really want to artificially lower cholesterol in the brain of a child whose brain is not yet fully developed? That is the next thalidomide waiting to happen. So if I have any message to give to your readers, to your listeners, it's if parents have taken their kids to the doctor and they've told you to put that kid on a statin drug, I beg of you, change doctors.
Are they truly prescribing statin drugs for children?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
On what premise?
On the premise that, my God, our kids are so fat, they're going to have heart disease. Their cholesterol is elevated. Let's get the cholesterol down.
Unbelievable. I had no idea they were giving it to kids.
Right, and statins are supposed to be forever. So we're talking about getting a customer for these companies from the age of, say, 11 to the age of however many decades that they live. Never been studied, never been shown to be effective, but that's what they want to do with our kids.
We have our guest on electromagnetic fields in the wings in the green room, but can you stay just a couple minutes to answer a few emails?
Just a couple, sure.
Okay, just a couple. Let's do this quick. Hey, Patrick, I was just wondering what your guest would say about sugar in goat's milk from Art.
Naturally occurring sugars, like I said earlier about fur, naturally occurring sugars in healthy whole foods are not as much of a problem. It's the added sugars, it's the concentrated sugars that are added to foods that never had them in the first place. That's the problem. It's the sugar overload.
Mike in Nashville writes, so is this why drinking alcohol can be a risk factor because the carbohydrates in beer, for example? Seems that everyone I've ever known who had heart problems were drinkers.
Well, that's I don't even know where to start to deconstruct that. I mean, alcohol has a whole other set of problems. It's metabolized. Alcohol in the liver is metabolized almost exactly the way fructose is. Or we should think of fructose as metabolized like alcohol. The only difference is you don't get high from fructose. But it's creating the same metabolic situation that alcohol does.
So is beer an issue for
beer
heart
is an
risk?
issue for weight gain because it's got estrogenic compounds in it. It tends to, store fat around the middle. There is some truth to that beer belly thing, and to the extent that you add fat cells, you're also adding inflammation because fat cells are inflammatory. So yeah, beer can be, but it kind of depends on the whole picture. It's not just one element. It's the whole pattern of how we eat and drink.
Would you please ask Dr. Bowden how one can do well without a gallbladder, eat or avoid fats?
You know what? That is too specific a medical question to go over. That would be something they have to discuss with their professional.
Gotcha. This is from Kailani. What would be the best sweetener? Stevia, honey, molasses, maple syrup, xylitol? I love molasses because it's got a lot of minerals and it's got some iron in it. It's still treated by the body as sugar. So is raw honey, even though it's a better food. These are all treated by the body as sugar. Now, stevia has no downside that I know of whatsoever, except I don't personally like it because I don't like the aftertaste. But if you don't mind the aftertaste, which is a little licoricey, it's perfectly healthy. Xylitol and erythritol, which is sold under the brand name Truvia, those are sugar alcohols, and they have, to my knowledge, and I've looked at it pretty extensively, no real downside, except in large amounts they can give you a little bit of diarrhea or a little bit of gas. But in reasonable amounts, those are very healthy sugars. They don't raise blood sugar. They're not processed like fructose in the liver, and they're basically pretty benign. Emailer asks, what does your guest say about traditional oatmeal with a little honey and real butter? Would this be a good or a bad in his
That's a
view?
good carbohydrate. Oatmeal is what we call a slow-burning carbohydrate. It doesn't raise blood sugar quickly. It's got a lot of fiber. The real kind of oatmeal, not the instant. And so I would, definitely include that in my list of good, healthy, whole food carbohydrates.
Why did you team up with Dr. Sinatra for the book?
Because my publisher of 13 books would not put out a book this controversial without cover from a board-certified cardiologist. And he's a good friend, and he's on the right side, and he's fighting the good fight. And I just called up my buddy Steve and said, we need a cardiologist on this book. And there he was.
I see, yeah. He's a good one. The Great Cholesterol Myth, I suspect it's available everywhere. This would be a fine book, I suspect, with all the research you've done, to give to uncles or aunts or whoever, fathers who are on statins, right? Wouldn't you think?
It would.
Yeah. Hey, did I dream this, or did somebody tell me that Dr. Oz has favorable reports on this book?
He was very, very kind to us. He did not push back nearly as much as we expected. He was very open. He was very gracious. He agreed with us on a great deal of it, especially on the need for the more modern particle test as a cholesterol test. Yes, he was very friendly to us on his show. If we were going on the doctors, and I don't expect that they will be as friendly as Dr. Oz was.
Well, it's just interesting that in other words, I guess what I'm saying, if you were on CNN saying all of this right now with your own show, you probably wouldn't have a show very long.
It's a very difficult message.
Is that fair? Is that a fair statement?
I don't know. Probably, it's a very difficult message to get out. The anti-sugar message has been incredibly difficult to get out, and we talk about it in the book. The politics of the sugar lobby they make the NRA look like child's play.
Really?
And it is very difficult to get this message out, because when you've got a consensus, or when everybody has heard something all their lives, and that includes doctors, and they've just heard this, and they've gotten this from the media, and it's reinforced in a million different subtle ways. When you go against the grain of that, there's always the crackpot factor. I mean, this has happened, with the guy that invented homocysteine, Kilmer McCulley. He was thrown out of Harvard. He's back there now, 25 years later, with his reputation restored. But when he first came out and said, I don't think it's cholesterol, I think it might be homocysteine, they literally took his funding away and put him in the basement until he finally quit. Yeah. So yes, it's a very hard thing to go against the mainstream with this, but I tell you, Patrick, I believe this in the bone marrow of my soul. 50 years from now, when we're all gone, they will look back at this way of treating heart disease, this obsessive concentration on lowering cholesterol, and they will say, what were they thinking?
Mr. Bowden, thank you so much. The Great Cholesterol Myth, we appreciate you getting up early and spending time with us.
Thank you, Patrick.
Been an honor.